The electric fence delivered 30,000 volts of pure justice. Karen flew off her ATV like she had been launched from a catapult landing face, first in the mud she had spent months creating with her daily trespassing. Her screams echoed across my 40 acres as neighbors came running to see what had happened. For 6 months, she had destroyed my crops every single day. For 6 months, she had ignored my polite requests and laughed at my property rights. The sheriff called it a civil matter. The lawyers wanted thousands of dollars. But farming has taught me patience, planning, and the ancient art of letting bullies dig their own graves. That morning, as Karen writhed in the dirt beside her overturned machine, I stood calmly in my kitchen window with a cup of coffee and watched justice finally bloom in my field like the crops she had tried so hard to destroy. I bought those 40 acres with dreams as big as the Montana sky above them. After 20 years of city noise, traffic jams, and concrete everywhere, I wanted nothing more than space to breathe and dirt under my fingernails. The real estate agent called it raw land, but I saw potential in every rolling hill and natural meadow. The house was small but perfect. White farmhouse style with a wraparound porch that faced east toward the sunrise. Behind it stretched my field, flat and fertile, just waiting for someone to love it back to life. I spent my first morning there sitting on that porch with coffee, watching the sun paint the mountains gold, and feeling like I had finally found home. Spring planting season became my church. I worked those 40 acres from dawn until dusk, turning soil that had been neglected for years back into productive farmland. Corn, soybeans, and winter wheat. Each seed I planted felt like a promise to the future. By summer, green shoots covered the field in neat rows that stretched toward the horizon. My nearest neighbor lived about half a mile south. Karen Mitchell seemed friendly enough when she introduced herself that first week. Middle-aged woman with short blonde hair and the kind of smile that did not quite reach her eyes. She drove over on her ATV to welcome me to the neighborhood, bringing homemade cookies and small talk about the weather. "Beautiful field you have there," she said, looking past me toward my newly planted crops. "Must have cost a fortune to get all that seed in the ground." I explained how I had saved for years to make this dream happen, how every plant out there represented my hope for a peaceful, self-sufficient life away from the chaos I had left behind. Karen nodded and smiled, but something in her expression made me uneasy, like she was calculating something in her head. The first time her ATV cut through my field, I figured it was an accident. I watched from my kitchen window as she rode straight across my corn rows, leaving deep tire tracks and crushed plants in her wake. My stomach dropped. Months of work damaged in 30 seconds. I walked over to her house that evening to discuss it politely, neighbor to neighbor. Karen answered the door in her bathrobe, looking annoyed that I had interrupted her television program. "Oh, the field thing," she said when I explained about the tire tracks. "It is just dirt anyway. Plants grow back." Just dirt. 6 months of planning, thousands of dollars in seed and fertilizer, endless hours of backbreaking work. Just dirt. I kept my voice calm and explained that the damaged plants would not recover this season, that her shortcut had cost me real money and months of effort. Karen shrugged. "Well, I have been using that route for years. It is the fastest way to get to the main road from my back pasture." Years. She had been trespassing on this property for years, probably since the previous owner stopped farming it. Now that someone actually lived here and worked the land, she expected to keep doing whatever she wanted. I went home that night feeling unsettled. The damage was done, but I hoped our conversation would prevent it from happening again. I sat on my porch watching the sunset and trying to ignore the ugly brown scar her tires had left across my green field. I should have known better. Bullies never stop just because you ask them nicely. Karen turned my morning coffee ritual into a daily nightmare. Every single day at exactly 8:30 in the morning, I would hear the roar of her ATV engine approaching from the south. Every single day, I would watch helplessly as she carved fresh wounds across my field. She had chosen the worst possible path. Instead of skirting the edges where damage would be minimal, Karen drove straight through the heart of my crops. Her tires crushed corn stalks and soybean plants, leaving behind deep ruts that filled with rainwater and turned into muddy scars across the landscape. I started documenting everything with my camera. Photos of the daily destruction, measurements of the tire tracks, close-up shots of plants that had been thriving one day and lay broken the next. The evidence folder on my computer grew thicker every week. By the second week, I tried talking to her again. This time I caught her in the act, walking out to meet her as she finished her morning ride of destruction. "Karen, we need to discuss this," I called out as she slowed down near my fence line. She shut off the engine and pulled off her helmet, looking at me like I was something unpleasant she had found on her shoe. "What now?" she asked. I gestured toward the fresh tire tracks behind her. "You are destroying my crops every day. I have asked you to stop, but it keeps happening. There has to be another way for you to get to the main road." Karen rolled her eyes. "Look, I have been using this route since before you moved here. I am not going to start taking the long way around just because you decided to plant some vegetables." "These are not vegetables. This is corn and soybeans. This is how I make my living." "Then maybe you should not have bought land next to someone who needs to get to work every day." The audacity took my breath away. She was destroying my property daily, and somehow I was the problem for owning land that she wanted to drive across. "Karen, this is my property. I have the deed. You cannot just drive through someone else's field whenever you feel like it." She started her engine back up, drowning out my words. "Watch me," she shouted over the noise, then sped off toward the road. That afternoon I walked the damage from her morning ride. 47 corn plants completely destroyed, dozens more damaged beyond recovery. The financial loss was adding up, but the emotional cost was worse. Every broken stalk felt personal. I researched property boundary laws that night, pulling up satellite maps and comparing them to my deed. No easement existed. No right-of-way had ever been granted. Karen was simply trespassing every single day and destroying my crops because it was convenient for her. The next morning brought a new horror. Karen had brought a friend. 2 ATVs now carved parallel tracks through my field, doubling the daily destruction. When I rushed outside to confront them, both women just waved and kept driving. I called the sheriff that afternoon. Deputy Martinez listened patiently to my complaint and promised to drive out for a look. When he arrived 2 hours later, I showed him the photographs, the property boundaries, and the fresh tire tracks. "Well, it is definitely trespassing," he agreed. "But unless you catch them in the act and want to press charges, this is really more of a civil matter. You might want to talk to a lawyer about getting an injunction." A lawyer. More time, more money, more bureaucracy while Karen destroyed my livelihood one ATV ride at a time. That evening I sat on my porch staring at my ruined field and feeling completely helpless. The peaceful dream I had worked so hard to build was turning into a daily nightmare, and nobody seemed willing or able to help me stop it. The worst part was knowing that tomorrow morning at 8:30, the sound of that ATV would start all over again. I decided to try the formal approach. If Karen would not listen to polite conversation, maybe an official letter would get through to her. I spent an entire evening crafting a detailed explanation of property rights, crop damage, and my request for her to find an alternative route to the main road. The letter was 3 pages long, professionally written, and completely reasonable. I hand-delivered it to her mailbox on a Sunday morning, hoping that putting my concerns in writing would make her understand the seriousness of the situation. Karen's response came 2 days later in the form of the most aggressive ATV ride yet. She made extra loops through my field, revving her engine loudly and deliberately targeting areas where my crops were healthiest. When she finished, she stopped at my fence line and held up my letter, tearing it into pieces and letting the wind scatter the fragments across my damaged plants. I was shaking with anger as I walked out to confront her. "Did you even read it?" I asked. "I do not need to read 3 pages of your whining," Karen snapped back. "You moved next to me, not the other way around. I was here first, and I will keep doing what I have always done." "What you have always done is trespassing and destruction of property." "What I have always done is gotten to work the fastest way possible. Maybe if you were not so controlling and unreasonable, we could work something out." Controlling, unreasonable, for asking someone to stop destroying my crops on my own property. That weekend, I decided to talk to Karen's husband. Mike Mitchell seemed like a decent man from the few interactions we had shared. Maybe he could talk sense into his wife where I had failed. I found him working in his garage on Saturday afternoon. Mike looked up from his workbench with a friendly smile when I approached. "Hey there, neighbor. How are things going with the farming?" "That is actually what I wanted to talk to you about," I said, then explained the daily trespassing and crop damage. Mike frowned as I described the situation. "Karen rides through your field every day. Every morning at 8:30. She has destroyed hundreds of plants so far this season." Mike set down his tools and looked genuinely concerned. "I had no idea it was that bad. Let me talk to her about finding a different route." For the first time in weeks, I felt hopeful. Maybe reasonable conversation with a reasonable person would finally solve this problem. Mike talked to his wife that evening. I know because I could hear them arguing through their open windows. The next morning at 8:30, Karen's ATV was louder than ever as she made her daily run through my field. But this time, Mike was riding behind her on a second machine. My heart sank as I watched both of them carve fresh destruction across my crops. When they finished, I walked out to meet them at the fence line. "Mike, I thought you were going to talk to her about stopping this." Mike avoided eye contact, looking embarrassed but not apologetic. "Well," she explained the situation to me. "Karen has been using this route for 15 years. It would be really inconvenient for her to change now. Inconvenient for her to stop trespassing on my property and destroying my crops. Look, I am sure we can work something out that makes everyone happy." Karen revved her engine impatiently. "I already told him there is nothing to work out. This is how I get to work, and this is how I will keep getting to work." "What if I paid for gravel to make you a proper road along the property line?" I suggested desperately. "What if you minded your own business?" Karen shot back. They drove away, leaving me standing alone beside the fresh tire tracks that represented another day of financial loss and emotional devastation. That afternoon, I called the sheriff again. Deputy Martinez sounded tired when he recognized my voice. "Same situation as before?" he asked. "Same situation, but now her husband is involved too. 2 ATVs every morning." "Like I said before, this is really a civil matter. Have you contacted a lawyer yet?" I had. 3 different lawyers, actually. All of them wanted retainers between $3,000 and $5,000 to pursue an injunction that might or might not work and could take months to resolve. None of them could guarantee that Karen would follow a court order any better than she followed common decency and property law. That night I stood in my ruined field calculating the damage. Between destroyed crops and legal fees, Karen daily joy rides were going to cost me over $10,000. Money I did not have. Money that represented years of savings and dreams of financial independence through farming. I made a decision that night that would change everything. If the law would not protect my property, I would have to protect it myself. I spent the next week researching every legal option available to protect my property. The internet became my classroom as I dove deep into agricultural law, property rights, and security measures that farmers could legally employ to protect their crops and livestock. What I discovered changed everything. Farmers have broad legal authority to protect their agricultural investments from damage. Electric fencing is not only legal but actively encouraged by agricultural extension offices for livestock control and crop protection. Wildlife deterrent systems are considered standard farming equipment in most rural areas. I called the county agricultural extension office the next morning and spoke with Tom Bradley, a specialist who had been helping local farmers for over 20 years. "Absolutely, you have every right to protect your crops," Tom confirmed when I explained my situation. "Electric fencing is one of the most effective methods. We recommend it for keeping deer out of cornfields all the time." "What about legal requirements?" I asked. "Just proper signage warning of electrical hazard and making sure your system meets safety standards. Most farm supply stores sell complete kits that are already compliant." Tom even offered to send me information packets about installation and maintenance. For the first time in months, I felt like I was getting helpful advice instead of bureaucratic runaround. My research expanded into motion-activated cameras, solar-powered lighting systems, and automated alert systems. All legal, all commonly used by farmers, all designed to protect agricultural investments from exactly the kind of damage Karen was causing daily. I spent hours studying installation guides and safety requirements. The electric fence systems used for agricultural purposes deliver a sharp but safe shock, designed to deter rather than injure. Proper grounding and voltage regulation make them completely legal and humane. The planning phase consumed my evenings for 2 weeks. I mapped out my entire property, calculating distances and power requirements. The system I designed would protect not just the area Karen was destroying, but my entire 40-acre investment. I visited 3 different farm supply stores, asking detailed questions about installation and maintenance. Every employee I spoke with confirmed that electric fencing for crop protection was standard practice. One elderly farmer in line behind me even volunteered his own success story about stopping ATV trespassers with similar methods. "Put up a good fence with proper warning signs, and your troubles will be over," he said with a knowing smile. "Trespassers learn real quick when they get bit by electricity." The material list was extensive but not expensive. Solar-charged fence controller, insulators, high-tensile wire, grounding rods, and warning signs. Everything available legally and openly at any farm supply store. I also invested in a complete security camera system. Motion-activated, night vision, cloud storage backup. If Karen or anyone else wanted to challenge my agricultural protection methods, I would have video evidence of every trespassing incident and every warning sign they chose to ignore. The permit process was surprisingly simple. A quick call to the county confirmed that no special permits were required for agricultural fencing on private property. The only requirements were proper warning signage and compliance with electrical safety standards. I purchased everything over the course of 3 days, loading my truck with coils of wire, metal posts, and electrical components. The farm supply store employees were helpful and encouraging, treating this like any other routine agricultural project. Back home, I read installation manuals cover to cover, watching online tutorials and taking detailed notes. This system had to be installed perfectly. No mistakes, no shortcuts, no legal vulnerabilities that Karen could exploit. The warning signs arrived last. Bright yellow plastic with bold black letters. Danger, electric fence, keep out. I ordered twice as many as I thought I needed, planning to make sure no one could claim they had not been warned. My final research focused on documentation. I needed to establish a clear timeline of trespassing incidents, property damage, and failed attempts at resolution. Every photograph, every conversation, every piece of correspondence would be organized and ready if legal questions arose later. Karen had no idea what was coming. While she continued her daily destruction of my crops, I was methodically preparing a response that would be completely legal, totally effective, and absolutely devastating to her sense of entitlement. The agricultural protection system I designed would not just stop the trespassing. It would deliver a lesson about property rights that Karen would never forget. Installation day was scheduled for the following Saturday. I had checked weather forecasts, confirmed all materials were ready, and arranged for a full day of uninterrupted work. Everything had to be perfect. By Sunday morning, Karen's daily joyride through my field would become a very different experience. Installation day arrived with perfect weather and perfect timing. Karen had left for work early that Friday morning, giving me all day to transform my vulnerable field into a fortress of agricultural justice. I started at dawn, working methodically from my property line toward the house. Each fence post went into the ground exactly where I had marked it during my planning phase. The solar controller mounted on a sturdy wooden post near my barn, positioned for maximum sun exposure and easy access for maintenance. The high tensile wire stretched tight and straight between insulators, creating clean lines that would deliver consistent electrical current across the entire system. I tested every connection twice, ensuring the voltage would be uniform and effective along every inch of the perimeter. Warning signs went up every 50 feet, bright yellow beacons that no reasonable person could miss or ignore. Danger, electric fence, agricultural protection system, keep out. Each sign was mounted at eye level and clearly visible from any approach angle. The motion-activated cameras took longer to install, but they were crucial for documentation. High-definition video with night vision capabilities, automatically triggered by movement within 30 feet of the fence line. Cloud storage meant the footage would be preserved even if someone tried to damage the cameras. By 5 in the afternoon, my agricultural protection system was complete and operational. I walked the entire perimeter one final time, checking every connection and testing the voltage with a specialized meter. 30,000 volts of pure deterrent power, exactly within legal limits for agricultural fencing. The system was beautiful in its simplicity. Solar-powered and completely autonomous, it would protect my crops 24 hours a day without any effort from me. Karen could continue her daily trespassing attempts, but now she would face the consequences of ignoring clearly posted warnings on private property. That evening I sat on my porch with a cup of coffee, watching the sun set over my newly protected field. For the first time in months, I felt truly peaceful. Tomorrow morning would bring either respectful compliance or swift education about property rights. I did not have to wait long to find out which one. 8:30 Monday morning arrived right on schedule. The familiar roar of Karen ATV approached from the south, just like every other morning for the past 6 months. I positioned myself at my kitchen window with my coffee and my camera, ready to document whatever happened next. Karen came into view riding fast and confident, heading straight for her usual path through the heart of my crops. She was moving even faster than normal, probably running late for work and eager to make up time with her illegal shortcut. She hit the electric fence at full speed. The effect was instantaneous and spectacular. 30,000 volts of agricultural protection delivered their message directly through her ATV handlebar, up her arms, and throughout her entire body. Karen launched off that machine like she had been fired from a cannon, sailing through the air before landing face first in the mud her daily trespassing had created. Her ATV kept going for another 20 feet before tipping over sideways, engine still running and wheels spinning uselessly in the air. The screaming started immediately. High-pitched shrieks of rage and disbelief that echoed across the countryside and brought neighbors running from 3 different directions. Karen writhed in the mud beside her overturned machine, covered head to toe in the brown slop her tires had churned up over months of trespassing. I calmly pulled out my phone and started recording. This was the moment I had been preparing for, the natural consequence of ignoring property rights and agricultural protection systems. Every second needed to be documented for legal purposes. "What the hell did you do?" Karen screamed when she spotted me in the window. I opened the window calmly. I installed an agricultural protection system with proper warning signs, just like farmers do to protect their crops from pests. "You tried to kill me." "I tried to protect my property with a legal electric fence system, the same system thousands of farmers use every day. Did you not see the warning signs?" Karen struggled to her feet, mud dripping from her hair and clothes. Her ATV was still running on its side, making horrible grinding noises as the engine strained against the tilted position. "I am calling the sheriff," she shrieked. "Please do," I replied calmly. "I will be happy to show him my agricultural protection permit, safety compliance documentation, and the warning signs you chose to ignore while trespassing on my property." Neighbors were arriving now, drawn by the commotion. Mrs. Patterson from the east, the Johnson family from the north, even old Mr. Crawford who rarely left his house. All of them could see Karen covered in mud beside her overturned ATV, with bright yellow warning signs clearly visible in the background. Karen tried to restart her machine, but the engine had flooded when it tipped over. She was stranded in my field, surrounded by evidence of her trespassing and the consequences of ignoring agricultural safety warnings. "This is not over," she snarled at me through the window. "You are absolutely right," I agreed. "It is just beginning." Karen called the sheriff before she even got home. Deputy Martinez arrived within an hour, finding me calmly working in my garden while Karen paced angrily in her driveway, still covered in dried mud and gesturing wildly toward my field. She assaulted me with an electric fence. Karen screamed as soon as the deputy stepped out of his patrol car. "I want her arrested for attempted murder." Deputy Martinez looked tired as he walked over to examine my agricultural protection system. He studied the warning signs, tested the fence voltage with his own meter, and took photographs of the installation from multiple angles. This is a standard agricultural electric fence, he concluded after 15 minutes of investigation. Properly installed, clearly marked, and completely legal for crop protection on private property. But she shocked me, Karen protested. You were trespassing on her property despite clear warning signs, Deputy Martinez replied patiently. Agricultural electric fences are specifically designed to deter unwanted intrusion while remaining within legal safety limits. I produced my documentation folder, showing the deputy my installation permits, safety compliance certificates, and the timeline of trespassing incidents that had led to this moment. How long has this been going on? He asked. 6 months of daily trespassing and crop destruction, I explained. I have photographs, dates, and documentation of every incident. I also have video footage of this morning encounter. Deputy Martinez reviewed my evidence carefully, then walked back to speak with Karen. Their conversation grew heated quickly, with Karen demanding arrests and the deputy explaining property law and agricultural protection rights. Ma'am, she has every legal right to protect her crops with electric fencing, I heard him say. You have no right to drive across her property, regardless of how long you have been doing it. Karen was not satisfied with this explanation. I am calling my lawyer, she announced. That is certainly your right, Deputy Martinez agreed. But I should warn you that trespassing charges are still possible if this behavior continues. After the deputy left, Karen disappeared into her house to make phone calls. I settled back into my garden work, feeling vindicated and peaceful for the first time in months. The call from Karen lawyer came 2 days later. Robert Henderson from Henderson and Associates had clearly been fed a very one-sided version of events. My client is considering a lawsuit for assault and intentional infliction of emotional distress, he began pompously. Your client was trespassing on my property despite clear warning signs and proper agricultural fencing, I replied calmly. I have video footage, sheriff reports, and 6 months of documented property damage. There was a long pause. Agricultural fencing. Standard electric fence for crop protection. Completely legal, properly installed, and clearly marked with safety warnings your client chose to ignore. Another pause. I will need to review the relevant statutes and get back to you. He never called back. Meanwhile, my neighbors began sharing their own Karen stories. Mrs. Patterson revealed years of disputes over property lines and tree trimming. The Johnson family described harassment over their children playing too loudly. Mr. Crawford had been threatened with code enforcement complaints for his vegetable garden. She has been bullying this entire neighborhood for years, Mrs. Patterson confided. Most of us just gave in because it was easier than fighting her. Word spread quickly about the electric fence incident. Karen attempts to rally community support backfired spectacularly, as neighbors finally felt safe to share their own experiences with her entitled behavior. 3 weeks later, Karen made one final attempt at trespassing. This time she approached on foot, trying to sneak through a corner of my field under cover of darkness. The motion-activated cameras caught everything in high-definition night vision, and the electric fence delivered another memorable lesson about property rights. The footage of Karen dancing around like she was on fire, cursing and stumbling back toward her house in the dark, became legendary among the neighbors. Several of them asked for copies. Karen's isolation was now complete. Her years of neighborhood bullying had caught up with her, and the community had finally found the courage to stand together against her entitled behavior. The transformation was remarkable and swift. Karen's daily ATV ride stopped completely after her second encounter with agricultural justice. The sound of her engine, which had terrorized my mornings for 6 months, became nothing more than an unpleasant memory. My crops began recovering immediately. The trampled areas filled in with new growth, and the ugly tire ruts gradually disappeared under healthy green vegetation. By late summer, my 40 acres looked like the productive farmland I had always envisioned. The electric fence system proved its worth beyond stopping trespassers. Deer avoided my crops completely, and the motion-activated cameras captured fascinating wildlife footage without any crop damage. What had started as a defensive measure became a valuable farming tool. Property values in our area increased as word spread about effective agricultural protection methods. 3 other neighbors installed similar systems after hearing about my success. The entire community became more secure and peaceful as property rights were respected and enforced. Karen's behavior changed dramatically once she realized the neighborhood would no longer tolerate her bullying tactics. Without the daily outlet of trespassing and crop destruction, she seemed lost and increasingly isolated. Her attempts to create new conflicts fell flat when neighbors simply referred to my successful example of standing up for property rights. The legal victory was complete and lasting. No lawsuits were filed, no charges were pressed, and no further disputes arose. Karen's lawyer had clearly explained the reality of agricultural protection law and the futility of challenging a property owner who had documented everything properly. Summer turned to fall, and my first harvest exceeded every expectation. The corn yielded beautifully, soybeans filled their pods perfectly, and winter wheat was already sprouting in the fields Karen had once destroyed daily. The financial success proved that standing up to bullies was not just emotionally satisfying but economically essential. Other farmers in the area began consulting with me about protection systems and documentation methods. Word spread through agricultural networks about the effectiveness of proper electric fencing and security cameras for deterring trespassers and protecting crops. The County Agricultural Extension Office used my installation as a model for their educational programs. Tom Bradley brought groups of farmers to see the system in operation, turning my property into an unofficial demonstration site for agricultural protection methods. Karen eventually stopped making eye contact when we encountered each other in town. The confident entitlement that had driven her daily trespassing was replaced by sullen avoidance and obvious embarrassment. She had learned an expensive lesson about the difference between rural convenience and property rights. By winter, Karen had put her house up for sale. Unable to maintain her bullying behavior in a community that had learned to stand up for itself, she chose to relocate rather than change her entitled attitude. The "for sale" sign in her yard felt like a final victory. Spring arrived with new possibilities and perfect peace. I sat on my porch with morning coffee, watching the sunrise paint my protected fields in golden light. The electric fence hummed quietly in the background, a gentle reminder that some problems solve themselves when you have the courage to establish proper boundaries. My phone buzzed with a text message from Mrs. Patterson. New neighbors moving into Karen's old place next week. Young farming couple with 2 small children. Thought you would want to know. I smiled and typed back a response. I will bake them some welcome cookies and show them around the neighborhood. Maybe explain how agricultural protection systems work, just in case they ever need the information. The cycle would continue, but now our community was stronger and better prepared. Karen had inadvertently taught us all valuable lessons about property rights, community solidarity, and the importance of standing up to bullies before they gain too much power. I finished my coffee and walked out to check the fence voltage, ensuring my agricultural protection system remained ready for whatever challenges the future might bring. Some investments pay dividends for years to come,